On the day that he was inaugurated, the Washington Post had an article on impeaching him.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States.
They had an absolute legitimate meltdown.
If you try to change a system that big, the system fights back.
The story behind the biggest election takeover in history.
We're only now being able to finally confirm exactly how this worked.
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife are donating more money to local governments ahead of the election. $100 million on top of a $300 million gift.
The most money any individual has ever spent to win a presidential campaign in the history of our country.
I actually became infuriated that someone had allowed Zuckerberg to tip the scale.
The election was bought way before Election Day.
They stole it fair and square. They changed the voting rules in the middle of the game.
A nation divided.
This was the greatest billionaire assault on election integrity we've ever seen.
A billionaire-funded plot against the president.
Do you believe that they used the COVID emergency as an excuse to pull this partisan voter turnout operation?
Am I allowed to give you a one-word answer? Yes.
There are many people out there who have not given up on seeing Hillary Clinton in the White House.
I have an objection.
I object to the certificate from the state of Alabama.
You can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
Mr. President, I object to the certificate from the state of Georgia.
Mr. President, I object to the votes from the state of Wisconsin.
There is circumstantial evidence of collusion.
I object to the certificate from the state of North Carolina.
Mr. President, I object.
You're a member of the Judiciary. Do you believe the president right now has been an agent of the Russians?
Yes, I think there's more evidence than he is. Yes, and I think all the arrows point in that direction, and I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that he's not.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina.
Mr. President, I object on behalf of the millions of Americans.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
Mr. President, I object to the votes for South Carolina.
Mr. President, I object because people are horrified.
He's working on behalf of the Russians, yeah.
I do not wish to debate. I wish to ask, is there one United States senator who will join me in this letter?
You said there are at least 3 very real scenarios whereby Google, perhaps even without the leader's knowledge, could shape or even decide the election next year, the presidential election. Whether or not Google executives see it this way, the employees who constantly adjust the search giant's algorithms are manipulating people every minute of every day. The adjustments they make increasingly influence our thinking, including, it turns out, our voting preferences. You add that our research leaves little doubt about whether Google has the ability to control voters. In laboratory and online experiments conducted in the United States, we were able to boost the proportion of people who favored any candidates by between 37 and 63% after just one search session. The impact of viewing biased rankings repeatedly over a period of weeks and months would have undoubtedly been larger. Google is massive. Almost everybody uses Google. It's a search engine. How are they able to manipulate the vote? What are they doing?
If Google's search results, for any reason, are biased to favor one candidate or one party, for any reason, that will shift a lot of opinions about that candidate, and that will shift a lot of votes. And in fact, it can shift millions of votes. It doesn't matter whether an employee or an executive at Google did this deliberately. The algorithm alone, a computer program, could be doing this, and it will still affect the outcome of elections.
Well, are they trying to affect the outcome of elections?
I don't know for sure. Now, there have been a number of leaks recently from Google. There have even been some whistleblowers who are saying that Google has a very strong political bias internally, that they lean left, which I tend to do as well, that they are deliberate in wanting to affect.
Well, I'm interested in what you found. Are they biased or not? What happened, let's be very specific, what happened in 2016, the presidential election?
In 2016, I set up the first ever monitoring system that allowed me to look over the shoulders of a diverse group of American voters. There were 95 people in 24 states. I looked at politically oriented searches that these people were conducting on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. I was able to preserve more than 13,000 searches and 98,000 web pages. And I found very dramatic bias in Google search results, not Bing or Yahoo, just Google's, favoring Hillary Clinton, whom I supported strongly. But the point is, I reported what I found. And that level of bias was sufficient, I calculated, to have shifted over time somewhere between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary without anyone knowing that this had occurred.
And so how does that get accomplished, these algorithms that are changed and adjusted and so forth? But to have that significant of an impact, obviously someone or something wants someone to win and someone to lose. For the person who goes on Google, how is that manifested?
Well, if you go onto Google and you type in anything that's election related, and that could be hundreds of things, you type in immigration, or you type in the wall, or you think of all the things that are related to elections. The point is, you end up with some search suggestions that are flashed at you as you're typing. We now know that those search suggestions have a very, very powerful effect on people, and that they alone can shift opinions and votes dramatically. And then search results appear below. And the point is, if there's a bias in them, which means if a search result that's high up on the list, if that takes you to a web page that makes one candidate look better than another, well, if you're undecided and you're trying to make up your mind, what we've learned is that information posted high in Google search results will shift opinions among undecided people dramatically, because people trust Google, and they especially trust high-ranking search results. That's why 50% of all clicks go to the top 2 items.
Is that what Google did?
Well, again, I can't say what Google did, but I can tell you what we found. We found a very dramatic pro-Hillary Clinton bias on Google, but not the other search engines, and in all 10 search positions on the first page of search results. That's quite dramatic.
So it's on Google. People go on Google. It's front-loaded, pro-Hillary, anti-Trump. Well, then who does it if Google doesn't do it? It just happens?
Well,
somebody has to put information in for information to be prioritized.
What Google tends to say in these kinds of situations is it's an organic phenomenon. Organic, like organic food, like organic is good. So it's organic, meaning it's all generated by users. It's entirely the fault of users, and the fact is...
it?
Well, the point is that's nonsense, because in the controlled experiments I run, I determine which candidate is favored in search results, or I can mix up the search results so they favor neither candidate. So Google actually has total control over what users see. So to blame this kind of bias on users, it just makes no sense.
Now, pedestrians like me, that's the result of these algorithms, these models that are set up. People set up algorithms, don't they? Algorithms don't set themselves up.
Well, people create the algorithms to begin with, for sure. And as one of the recent whistleblowers from Google has said, we make our algorithms do exactly what we want them to do. But the fact is, Google also acknowledges adjusting their algorithm at least 600 times a year. And we also now know for sure, because of leaks, that Google uses blacklists internally, and that they also do re-ranking, de-ranking, fringe ranking. They're constantly making manual adjustments to what we see. So they have control. Whether they deny this or not, they have complete control over what we see. And if there's bias favoring one candidate or one party or one dog food, the fact is they have control over that.
Has Google, in terms of the company, the executives, shown political bias in the past?
Well, it's a matter of record that their top executives and most of their employees have one dog food. The fact is they have control over that.
Has Google, in terms of the company, the executives, shown political bias in the past?
Well, it's a matter of record that their top executives and most of their employees have a very strong liberal bias. I sympathize with that. I don't like the fact that bias is getting expressed in a way that's really, in my opinion, interfering with the free and fair election. But typically 95% or more of donations from Google go to Democrats. The former head of Google, Eric Schmidt, offered in writing to run Hillary Clinton's tech campaign in 2016. Hillary Clinton's chief technology officer is a woman named Stephanie Hannon. Right before she came over to Hillary's team, she was an executive at Google. And Google and Alphabet, its parent company, they were Hillary Clinton's largest donors in 2016.
Let me just say here for the record, so the audience knows, if the CEO of Google wants to come on this program and sit in this chair and have a 40-minute discussion with me, you're more than welcome. I have no problem with equal time. In fact, I would encourage it. Let's continue here. 2018, the Democrats picked up a whole bunch of seats. Did you monitor that too?
We did some monitoring in 2018. This time we had more than 160 field agents. We deliberately focused, because it's a midterm election, on 3 staunchly Republican districts in Orange County, California, thinking perhaps maybe if there is something going on with search results, maybe we'd pick it up in those counties. In all 3 counties, the Democrat won, so they were flipped. And we measured substantial bias, liberal bias, in the Google search engine, but not Bing or Yahoo. That's very, very important that we're finding it in one search engine, but not the others. And that level of bias easily, very easily, could account for the win margins that occurred in each of those districts. And even more problematic here, if that level of bias had been present in Google nationwide,
for all the districts,
for all the races, that would have shifted to Democrats upwards of 78.2 million votes. Now, that's spread across many races. But the point is,
that's enormous.
Well, there are 2 big problems here, though. Besides the fact that it's a lot of votes, this is occurring subliminally. It's occurring without people's knowledge. People can't see the bias in search results. I can't.
Let's stop here.
You're not a Republican, and nor are you a conservative. Is that accurate?
That would be an understatement.
And indeed, you're the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today.
Correct.
So you're a respected academic. You testified before this committee that Google's manipulation of votes gave at least 2.6 million additional votes to Hillary Clinton in the year 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I want to make sure I understand. You personally supported and voted for Hillary Clinton.
I was a very strong public supporter of Hillary Clinton, yes.
So you're not dismayed that people voted for her, but your testimony is that Google is, through bias in search results, manipulating voters in a way they're not aware of.
On a massive scale. And what I'm saying is that I believe in democracy, I believe in the free and fair election, more than I have any kind of allegiance to a candidate or a party.
And looking forward, if I understood your testimony correctly, you said in subsequent elections, Google and Facebook and Twitter and big tech manipulation could manipulate as many as 15 million votes in a subsequent election.
In 2020, if all these companies are supporting the same candidate, there are 15 million votes on the line that can be shifted without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
Now, you described the Go Vote reminder, and you said it wasn't a public service announcement, but rather manipulation. Can you explain how? I'm not sure everyone followed the details of that.
Well, sure. If on Election Day in 2016, if Mark Zuckerberg, for example, had chosen to send out a Go Vote reminder, say just to Democrats, and no one would have known if he had done this, that would have given that day an additional at least 450,000 votes to Democrats. And we know this without doubt because of Facebook's own published data, because they did an experiment that they didn't tell anyone about during the 2010 election. They published it in 2012. It had 60 million Facebook users involved. They sent out a Go Vote reminder, and they got something like 360,000 more people to get off their sofas and go vote, who otherwise would have stayed home. The point is, I don't think that Mr. Zuckerberg sent out that reminder in 2016. I think he was overconfident. I think Google was overconfident. All these companies were. I don't think he sent that out. Without monitoring systems in place, we'll never know what these companies are doing. But the point is, in 2018, I'm sure they were more aggressive. We have lots of data to support that. And in 2020, you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out. And the methods that they're using are invisible. They're subliminal. They're more powerful than most any effects I've ever seen in the behavioral sciences, and I've been in the behavioral sciences for almost 40 years.
You know, our Democratic colleagues on this committee often talk about what they view as the pernicious effect of big money and big corporate dollars. What you are testifying to is that a handful of Silicon Valley billionaires and giant corporations are able to spend millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars collectively, massively influencing the results of elections. And there's no accountability. You said we don't know. We have no way of knowing if Google or Facebook or Twitter sends it to Democrats or Republicans or how they bias it, because it's a black box with no transparency or accountability whatsoever. Am I understanding you correctly?
Senator, with respect, I must correct you.
Please.
If Mark Zuckerberg chooses to send out a go vote reminder just to Democrats on Election Day, that doesn't cost him a dime.
Fair enough. You happen to know who the Hillary Clinton campaign's #1 financial supporter was in the year 2016?
I think I do, but please remind me.
The #1 financial supporter of the Hillary Clinton campaign in the 2016 election was the parent company of Google, Alphabet, who was our first witness. They were her #1 financial donor, and your testimony is, through their deceptive search methods, they moved 2.6 million votes in her direction. I would think anybody, whether or not you favor one candidate or another, should be deeply dismayed about a handful of Silicon Valley billionaires having that much power over our elections to silently and deceptively shift vote outcomes.
Again, with respect, I must correct you. The 2.6 million is a rock bottom minimum. The range is between 2.6 and 10.4 million, depending on how aggressively they used the techniques that I've been studying now for 6.5 years.
Wow. Could you just say that again, please?
The 2.6 million is a rock bottom minimum. The range is between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes, depending on how aggressive they were in using the techniques that I've been studying, such as the search engine manipulation effect, the search suggestion effect, the answer bot effect, and a number of others. They control these, and no one can counteract them. These are not competitive. These are tools that they have at their disposal exclusively.